Anakai, good morning. Welcome. We are in between community meeting and first period, so we'll give it about 5 more minutes and then we will jump in. So thank you for joining us this morning. All right, y'all. Welcome again. Hopefully, everybody is back with us. All right. If you were looking at our mug slide for today, you'll see we are checking out Homegoing again. All right, so our objective for today is to be able to read and analyze chapters 1 and 2 of Homegoing by Yagayasi. We'll probably just get through chapter 1. Okay, here is the standard that we are looking at with this lesson. Okay, here is our do now question for today. This kind of ties into what we'll be doing in checkpoint 1 after we read each part of the story. All right, what is point of view? And welcome to whoever joined us. That is Ashlyn Day. Good morning. Good morning. All right. So again, what is point of view and how does it affect the way a story is told? Please take a minute or two, think about this, and respond in the chat for me. Okay. Let's take at least 2 minutes for this. Okay. So again, what is point of view in terms of story or literature, and how does it affect the way a story is told? Please think about this and respond in the chat for me to get started today. Thank you guys. And welcome to whoever just joined us again. So we got a couple people in here. Darian, Isabel, good morning, friends.
Good morning.
All right. So this is our do now question we are starting with today, since you guys are just joining us. All right. What is point of view and how does it affect the way a story is told? Please think about this for, let's say, another minute, since we had a couple people join us, and then respond in the chat. All right. So I should start seeing some responses in the chat in about another minute if I don't already. Thank you guys. All right, I'm gonna check the chat. We should have some responses coming in here for this if we don't already. All right, what do we do not? So let's take maybe another minute or two with this. All right, if you don't know or you're stumped, you can tell me that in the chat, but I would like you to at least respond one way or the other. All right, what is point of view and how does it affect the way a story is told? Okay, this is the question we want to be thinking about today. All right, we should be able to get at least 2 responses in the chat for this from 2 different people, since we got about 10 or so people with us this morning. So when you think about a story, what is the point of view? Or if we've heard that phrase before, point of view, what does that mean? What is it? And how might that affect the way a story is told? Any thoughts on this? Please put them in the chat if you got them. And I know some of you may be typing still, so I apologize if I am assuming nobody's answering. All right, we got a few in there now. Thank you. So Nakai said how someone views the story, and actually I said how someone sees the story. All right, both are similar, both also correct. All right, point of view is the viewpoint, literally, of somebody who's telling you the story. All right, so how can so then to our second part of that question, how can different points of view affect how a story is told? Right? Any thoughts on that? And I'll put that in the chat too. So if we think about the same story, how can it be affected when told from different points of view? So we know what point of view is. The how someone sees the story, the viewpoint or lens through which somebody is seeing or telling a story. So then how can that story be affected by different points of view? What do we think? You can respond in the chat. You can turn on your mic and come off mute, answer that way. But how can different points of view affect how our story is told? What do we think? What do we think? Any thoughts on this? There is a question in the chat, Kanai, that we are thinking about. So we've looked at our do now question for the day, which was what's point of view, right? And a few of us have answered that in the chat. So now my follow-up question is, if we know that point of view is the way somebody sees a story, or the lens through which somebody is viewing and telling a story, how can that story be affected by different points of view? So another way to think about it is if we have the same story told by two different people, and each of those people has a different point of view, is that story going to be the same both times, or might it be different in each case? You know, is each of those people going to tell the story exactly the same word for word? Like I said, each person has their own perspective. It may be different. Definitely, it will definitely be different. Okay, because like I said, each person has their own perspective. Each person has their own point of view. Right. So, a common example of this kind of stuff is, like a little kid gets in trouble, right? And then they go, "What happened?" And the parent might say, "Well, they were out of bed trying to get a snack when they weren't supposed to." That's the parent's point of view. The little kid's point of view is, well, I was hungry and I didn't know what time it was, and I decided to go up and get a snack. I didn't realize I was breaking any rules, or something like that. I'm just making that up at the top of my head, but we can see how we have the same story but told from two different points of view. It can look very similar. Another kind of a little bit more heavy, but good real world example of this is, there's a lot, with all of the racial and social justice, movements that are going on right now. Every time there is a case where, a police officer shoots and injures or kills, an unarmed person of color, that's the same story told from two very different points of view, right? One point of view is from the police officer. Okay, it was my life, I felt my life was in danger, whatever they say. And the other point of view is from the unarmed black man or woman or person of color. It's, I didn't have a weapon on me. I wasn't trying to do anything threatening, whatever the case may be. So that's another good example of how we can see, the same story can be drastically different when told from two different points of view. Does anybody else have another example that they can think of or have read or seen where a story was very different based on different points of view? Anything that happened to you personally or people you know that, that one thing could be told very differently by, two different points of view? Any other examples anybody can think of? No, that's okay. If you are still trying to think of one and it comes to you, you can put it in the chat. That's fine too. But point of view is something we're going to be thinking about a lot as we read through parts of this story, because each chapter in this story is told from a different person's point of view, but it's still the same story overall. So we'll see how the story changes and the story is affected as the point of view changes. Okay. So questions on any of that? All right, everybody's still with me? Yes? All right. If I don't hear any questions or concerns, I'm going to assume everybody is still good to go.
We're doing something like on a computer.
So as far as right now, nothing on the computer that is going to be due today. But I am going to, if we do have time, show you what is going to be due. But if you're not at your computer right now and you're just kind of following along on your phone, that's okay for right now.
Okay. And also, Dear Family Tree. I didn't complete it, but I will do it though.
All right, no worries. Yep. Like I said, I'll be accepting them probably up until the end of this week. Okay. Thank you for letting me
Okay.
know. All right, also in the chat, I have just posted a link that will take you to, let me share my screen. It will take you to a PDF version of our story that looks just like this. All right. If you were here on Friday, this should seem a little familiar. If the if the link doesn't work in the chat, you can just copy paste it and put it up here in your browser, and then get to the site that way. You want to scroll down to about halfway through. On yours, it'll be page 15, like it says up here on mine, where we see it starts the next week. The old chief died. That's where we're going to be starting today. That's where we left off last class. All right. So, is there anyone that was here last class who can give us a quick recap of what happened in our story so far? Either in the chat or you can come off mute. But can anyone remind us what happened so far in our story? What characters we met? What has happened with them so far? All right, so we know we met uh, one of our main characters, Effia, right? And we're kind of following her as she's starting to grow up here. We know she was born in not so great circumstances, right? The night she's born, there's a fire that destroys a lot of the crops. And so she always kind of has that hanging over her, um, you know, and that creates a very stressful relationship with her and her mother. Um, her and her father get along a little bit better, and then towards the end of the first part where we left off last class, we see that she has chosen a boy from the tribe that she knows she wants to marry, and she's kind of getting ready to be presented as his wife. He's eventually going to become the chief, so she's very excited for that, because we know that if she doesn't marry within the tribe, she will just get married off to a British soldier, and she'll kind of be taken to the castle and be away from her family, and all that stuff. And then, right where we left off, she has started to experience her first period. All right, so she's beginning to like mature, grow up, but her mother says, "Hey, don't tell anybody else about this." And we're gonna try to see if we can figure out why that may be. All right. So again, if you are following along via the link and you have this pulled up on your screen, we are starting right here where it says the next week the old chief died. It'll be on page 15 of this link. If you would prefer to just listen as I read, that is fine too. Right? That's where we're going to start now. Okay. So I may pause and ask some questions as we go. So please do be following along, and then I will have a question for everyone to answer before we leave today. So please don't tune out. The next week, the old chief died. The funeral announcements were out to all of the surrounding villages. The proceedings would last a month and end with a Biku's chief ceremony. The women of the village prepared food from sunrise to sunset. Drums were made out of the finest wood, and the best singers were called upon to raise their voices. The funeral attendants began dancing on the fourth day of the rainy season, and they did not rest their feet until the ground had completely dried. At the end of the first dry night, Abika was crowned Omenhin, chief of the Fonte village. He was dressed in rich fabrics, his two wives on either side of him. Effia and Baba stood next to each other as they watched, and Kobe paced the crowd. And if you remember, Baba is Effia's mother, Kobe is her dad. Oh, excuse me. Every so often, Effia could hear him muttering that she, his daughter, the most beautiful woman in the village, should be up there too. As the new chief, Abika wanted to do something big, something that would bring attention to their village and make them a force to be reckoned with. After only 3 days in office, he gathered all of the men of the village to his compound. He fed them for 2 days straight, got them drunk on palm wine until their boisterous laughing and impassioned shouting could be heard from every hut. What will they do? Effia asked. That does not concern you, Baba said. In the 2 months since Effia had begun to bleed, Baba had stopped beating her. Payment for her silence. Some days, when they were preparing meals for the men, or when Effia would bring back the water she had fetched and watch Baba dip in with cupped hands, she would think they were finally behaving as mothers and daughters were supposed to behave. But then, other days, the long scowl would return to Baba's face, and Effie would see that her mother's new quiet was only temporary, her rage a wild beast that had been tamed for the moment. Kobe came back from the meeting place with a long machete. The handle was gold with carvings of letters that no one understood. He was so drunk that all of his wives and children stood around him in a circle at a distance of 2 feet while he shuffled about, jabbing the sharp instrument this way and that. We will make the village rich with blood, he screamed. He lunged at Fifi, who had wandered into the circle. and the boy, leaner and quicker than he had been in his days as a fat baby, swiveled his hips, missing the tip of the machete by only a few inches. Fifi had been the youngest one at the meeting. Everyone knew he would make a fine warrior. They could see it in the way he climbed the palm trees, in the way he wore. Oh, sorry. In the way he wore his silence like a golden crown. After her father left and Effie was certain that their mother had gone to sleep, she crawled over to Fifi. Wake up, she hissed, and he pushed her away. Even in half sleep, he was stronger than she was. She fell backward, but with the grace of a cat, flipped back onto her feet. Wake up, she said again. Fifi's eyes flashed open. Don't worry me, big sister, he said. What will happen, she asked. It's the business of men, Fifi said. You are not yet a man, Effie said. And you are not yet a woman, Fifi snapped back. Otherwise, you would have been there with Abiku this very evening as his wife. Effie's lips began to quiver. She turned to go back to her side of the hut, but Fifi caught her arm. We are helping the British and the Asantes with their trade. Oh, Effie said. It was the same story she had heard from her father and Abiku just a few months before. You mean we will give Asante golden fabric to the white men? Fifi clutched her tighter. Don't be stupid, he said. Abiku has made an alliance with one of the most powerful Asante villages. We will help them sell their slaves to the British. And so, the white men came to their village. Fat and skinny, red and tanned, they came in uniform with swords at their sides, their eyes looking sideways, always and ever cautious. They came to approve of the gods. Oh my god, sorry I'm yawning so much, guys. They came to approve of the goods Abiku had promised them. In the days following the chief ceremony, Kobe had grown nervous about the broken promise of Effie's womanhood. Nervous that Abiku would forget her in favor of one of the other women in the village. He had always said that he wanted his daughter to be the first, most important wife, but now even third seemed like a distant hope. Every day he would ask Baba what was happening with Effie, and every day Baba would reply that she was not yet ready. In desperation, he decided to allow his daughter to go over to Abiku's compound with Baba once a week so that the man could see her and remember how much he had once loved her face and figure. Ariku the Wise, the first of Abiku's wives, greeted them as they came in one evening. Please, Mama, she said to Baba, we weren't expecting you tonight. The white men are here. We can go, Effie said, but Baba clutched her arm. If you don't mind, we would like to stay, Baba said. Arikua gave her a strange look. My husband will be angry if we come back too early, Baba said, as if that were enough of an explanation. Effie knew that she was lying. Kobe had not sent them there that night. It was Baba who had heard that the white men would be there and insisted that they go pay their respects. Arikua took pity and left to ask Abiku if the two of them might stay. You will eat with the women, and if the men come in, you will not speak, she said once she had returned. She led them deeper into the compound. Effie watched hut after hut pass by until they entered the one where the wives had gathered to eat. She sat next to Millicent, whose pregnant belly had begun to show, no bigger than a coconut, slung low. Arika had prepared fish and palm oil stew, and they dug in until their fingers were stained orange. And if we remember from last time, Millicent is somebody similar in age to Effie, whose mother married a white British soldier. So she's the first mixed race member of the village. Soon, a maidservant Effie had not noticed before came into the room. She was a tiny girl, only child, whose eyes never lifted from the ground. Please, Mama, she said to Rikua. The white men would like to tour the compound. Chief Abiku says you are to make sure you are presentable for them. Go and fetch us water, quick, Millicent said. And when the servant came back with a bucket full of water, they all washed their hands and lips. Effie tied her hair, licking her palms and rubbing her fingers along the tight baby curls that lined her edges. When she finished, Baba had her stand between Millicent and Enrico in front of the other women, and Effie had tried her best to seem smaller so as not to draw attention to herself. Before long, the men came in. Abiku looked as a chief should, Effie had thought, strong and powerful, like he could fit 10 women above his head and toward the sun. Two white men came in behind him. There was one who Effie thought must be the chief of the white men because of the way the other glanced at him before he moved or spoke. The white chief wore the same clothes as the rest of them wore, but there were more shiny golden buttons along his coat and on the flaps above his shoulders. He seemed older than Abiku, his dark brown hair flecked with gray, but he stood up straight as a leader should stand. These are the women, my wives and children, the mothers and daughters, Abiku said. The smaller, more timid white man watched him carefully as he said this, and then turned to the white chief and spoke their strange tongue. The white chief nodded and smiled at all of them, looking carefully at each woman and saying hello in his poor Fonte. When his hello reached Effie, she couldn't help but giggle. The other women shushed her, and embarrassment like heat began to move into her cheeks. I'm still learning, the white chief said, resting his eyes on Effie, his Fonte an ugly sound in her ears. He held her gaze for what seemed like minutes, and Effie felt her skin grow even hotter as the look in his eyes turned into something more wanton. The dark brown circles of his irises looked like large pots that toddlers could drown in. And he looked at Effie just like that, as though he wanted to keep her there, in his drowning eyes. Color quickly flooded into his cheeks. He turned to the other white man and spoke. No, she is not my wife, Abiku said, after the man had translated for him, his voice not bothering to hide his annoyance. Effie hung her head, embarrassed that she had done something to cause Abiku shame, embarrassed he could not call her wife, embarrassed too that he had not called her by name, Effie the beauty. She wanted desperately to break her promise to Baba and announce herself as the woman she was. But before she could speak, the men walked away, and her nerve faded as the white chief looked over his shoulder at her and smiled. Okay? So take a little bit of a pause there, and let's think about this. So we know that in the last section we read, Effie's mom, Baba, learned that, if you marry off your daughter to the English, the British soldiers, they'll be able to go live in the castle. They get money. They can give the money to friends and family and stuff like that. Okay. But then, you're away in the castle. If you marry somebody within the village, and you stay there, you get to be the wife of a chief, but you don't get any of that other stuff, right? So knowing that, and knowing that she is kind of forcing Effia to not admit that she has become a woman and gotten her period, and now Abiku, the chief, is kind of like not as interested in her, but she specifically brings them to his compound when she knows the British soldiers are going to be there. What do we think Effie's mom might be trying to do as far as Effie's marriage is concerned? I'll put that question in the chat as well. What do we think Effie's mom might be trying to do? In terms of how she wants Effie to be married. Do we think she has kind of a plan in place here with all the things she's doing? Who do we think that, we can think about this another way. Who do we think that Effia's mom would rather she marry? The white men from the British soldiers, or Abiku, the chief? Who do we think she would rather want Effia to marry? The British soldiers, who might let her live in the castle, give some money to the family, or do we think she she wants her to marry the chief of the village instead? Any thoughts on this? I'll put this in the chat too, one more time. Who do we think her mom wants her to marry more? The white men, the British soldiers, or Abigu, the chief of the tribe? Any thoughts on this? Anybody that has been listening or following along that can help us out? What do you think? Any thoughts here? Again, remember, ladies and gents, the more we engage, more we answer, the smoother, faster this stuff moves along. So you guys got to help me help you. All right. Well, if we're stumped on that, let's just keep those questions in mind as we continue on here. Right. Thinking about, okay, who does Effia's mom want her to marry more? And might she be doing stuff on purpose to achieve that goal? Right. Let's keep that in mind. His name was James Collins, and he was the newly appointed governor of the Cape Coast Castle. Within a week, he had come back to the village to ask Baba for Effia's hand in marriage. Right. So there we go. Maybe that gives us our answer already. Kobe's rage at the proposal filled every room like hot steam. She is all but promised to Abiku, he yelled at Baba when Baba told him that she was considering the offer. Yes, but Abiku cannot marry until her blood comes, and we have been waiting years now. I tell you, husband, I think she was cursed in that fire, a demon who will never become a woman. Think about it. What creature is that beautiful but cannot be touched? All of the signs of womanhood are there, yet still nothing. The white man will marry her regardless. He does not know what she is. Effie had heard the white man talking to her mother earlier that day. He would pay 30 pounds up front and 25 shillings a month in tradable goods to Baba as bride gift, more than even Abiku could offer, more than had been offered for any other Fonte woman in this village or the next. So it seems like now we've gotten our answer because, you know, we know that Baba is lying here, right? We know that Effie has gotten her blood, her period. We know that that's happened already, but she's telling her husband that it hasn't because she knows she can't get married to a bhikkhu until it does. So why do we think that is? What have we discovered now? Why has Baba been lying about Effia and keeping it a secret all this time? What do we just discover is her kind of her end game? What do they gain from this now? I'm gonna read through it one more time, see if you can pick it out this time. But I want you to tell me why Effia's mom has been lying, keeping her, womanhood a secret this whole time. So we'll go back and reread real quick. Right. She has all but promised to a bhikkhu, he yelled at Baba when Baba told him she was considering the offer. Yes, but a bhikkhu cannot marry until her blood comes, and we have been waiting for years now. I'll tell you, husband, I think she was cursed in that fire, a demon who will never become a woman. Think about it. What creature is that beautiful but cannot be touched? All of the signs of womanhood are there, and yet still nothing. The white man will marry her regardless. He does not know what she is. Effia had heard the white men talking to her mother earlier that day. He would pay 30 pounds up front and 25 shillings a month in tradable goods to Baba as bride gift, more than even a bhikkhu could offer, more than had been offered for any other Fante woman in this village or the next. Right. So reading that one more time again there, what do we now learn is Baba's motivation? Why has she kept Effia's womanhood a secret all this time? What is she trying to do here? Hey, Ambria, good morning. Welcome. Anyone who is still with us out there. So she can trade her, right, Ashley? So who's she trading her to? What's her who's she trying to marry her off to? You're right. Now we just gotta dig a little deeper here. Does she want to trade her to being in the tribe white man? Exactly. So this new British governor, okay? And so we know, like she said, the white man marries her regardless, whether she is a woman, is having her period or not. So why does she have to then lie about Effie getting her period? What happens if they find out she has gotten her period and become a woman? Who does she get married to then? Did anybody catch that part? Ashley is correct in telling us that her mom wants to kind of marry her off to the white man, sort of trade her because in return they get money and goods, right? Which is all true. But to do that, she has to keep lying about, you know, her not becoming a woman yet because if the tribe does find that out, then what happens? Who does she marry if they find out, she's uh had her period, become a woman, who did she go? Who did she get married to then? Anybody remember? This is the guy that her dad really wants her to marry because it's somebody that's still in the village. We stumped on this one. Right, no worries. So her dad wants her to marry a bhikkhu, who is the chief of the village, because um, he's saying then you'll be the wife of the chief, and it's high honor and all that stuff. But Baba, her mom, knows hey, we can get even more you know out of this, even more trade goods, all that stuff if she marries the white man, and she can't marry a bhikkhu until she becomes a woman, until she gets her period. So that's why we now know they've been lying and keeping it a secret this whole time. All right. So now we'll see if that actually works out. All right. Good job, Ashley. Thank you. Effie could hear her father pacing all through the evening. She even awoke the next morning to the same sound, the steady rhythm of his feet on the hard clay earth. We must make Abiku think it was his idea, he finally said. And so the chief was called to their compound. He sat beside Kobe as Baba told him her theory, that the fire that had destroyed so much of their family's worth had also destroyed the child. She has the body of the woman, but something evil lurks in her spirit, Baba said, spitting on the ground for emphasis. If you marry her, she will never bear your children. If the white man marries her, he will think of this village fondly, and your trade will prosper from it. Abiku rubbed his beard carefully as he thought about it. Bring the beauty to me, he said finally. Kobe's second wife brought Effia into the room. She was trembling and her stomach pained her so much that she thought she might excuse me. I emptied her bowels right there in front of everyone. Abiku stood up so that he was facing her. He ran his fingers along the full landscape of her face, the hills of her cheeks, the caves of her nostrils. A more beautiful woman has never been born, he said finally. He turned to Baba, but I see that you are right. If the white man wants her, he may have her. All the better for our business with them, all the better for the village. Kobe, big, strong man that he was, began to weep openly, but Baba stood tall. She walked over to Effia after Abiku had left and handed her a black stone pendant that shimmered as though it had been coated in gold dust. She slipped it into Effia's hand and then leaned into her until her lips were touching Effia's ear. Take this with you when you go, Baba said, a piece of your mother. And when Baba finally pulled away, Effia could see something like relief dancing behind her smile. Yep. So, stop there for today since we got about 5 minutes left. But now we see that our prediction was true. Effia's mom, Baba, her kind of plan all along was to get her to marry the British soldiers. So that's why they were keeping her blood a secret. Okay. So what I would like us to do with the last 5 minutes that we have before we go. Okay. I'm going to put a question in the chat. All right. And I would like us to, I know some people joined us a little bit late, so that's okay. You can always go back to our class recording and get caught up there, or come see me in the Summit Lab later. But there's a question in the chat right now that says, what do you think about the gift Baba gives Effia, which is what we just read, where we just ended. What do you think it might symbolize, and why do you think she gave it to her? Okay. So again, that's what we just read, what we just finished. She gives her that little piece of gold and said, take this with you when you go. It's a piece of your mother. And if you, like, the narrator tells us, Effia sees that she almost seems relieved, right, that she is going to be married off to the white man. So think about this question, and I want you to respond to it in the chat for me. When I see your response to this in the chat, then you are good to go for today. All right. Please remember that we have an assembly at 11:30. So I will see you all again back there, getting some shout outs for progress reports and such. And then we will start to dig into point of view and answering checkpoint 1 when we come back on Friday. Okay. If I still don't have your family tree, you have until Friday to get that to me. All right. And please keep checking your Yes Philly email because I may be sending you guys a video of me reading some more of the book to help us get caught up and keep, staying on pace. All right. But if you can, before you go, please take a look at that question that I just put in the chat and give me your best response to that. All right. And Slim, I just saw your answer in the chat. No worries if you can respond to at least one part of that question. I would appreciate that. Everybody else, again, as soon as I see your response to that question in the chat, you are good to go. So please put that in there right now before you leave. All right. Only got one response so far. So hopefully I see one or two more here before we wrap up. All right. Again, what do we think about that gift that Baba gives to Effia? The part that we just read right before we stopped, right? What do you think that gift might mean? Why do you think she gives it to her? Think about that. Respond in the chat for me, please. Give it about another maybe minute or two before we end the chat. And if I don't see any responses there, then I'm going to ask that you message me them on Google Hangouts or send me an email because I would like to see them from you one way or the other. All right. Salima, I appreciate your honesty. Thank you. All right. So again, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, I know it is tough to kind of be reading this book virtually. This is the best way to make sure we are all, still on track and following along, paying attention, is to kind of have these questions like this. So next time, please make sure we are kind of tuned in a little bit more. All right, Tyquil, I do see something from you. Thank you very much. I think she gave it her like you could keep it and feel protected. All right, that's cool. That's an interesting theory. We'll see if that pans out. All right, feel protected when she goes away. All right, very cool. All right. So anybody else who has a thought, please put that in the chat before you go. All right, and then we will start to wrap up. Kira, welcome. You're just a minute or two early here. Okay. Anybody else from second period? Please throw your response in the chat. If not, you can message me later on Google Hangouts or send it to me in an email. All right. At this time, I am going to end the chat so I can get ready for second period. So thank you so much. I will see you all in the assembly at 11:30, and then back here again on Friday. Okay. Thank you guys. All right, Isabel, no worries. Thank you.